Yes, I think we'll start out. Hi, everyone, and welcome to this Attention crash course today with Karen Nielsen-Field, all the way from Australia. And good afternoon to you, Karen.
Good afternoon. Good morning.
And thanks so much for being with us today. I'm just going to share my screen here and give you a brief introduction. Today we're going to talk about, attention. I assume most people know that is a theme for today. And for all of those out there who are thinking, who exactly is Karen Nielsen-Field? Karen, you've spent at least 17 years as a media science researcher, 10 of those years at the Ehrenberg Bass Institute for Marketing Science. And for those of you who don't know that place, it's the largest research center in the world within marketing science. A really interesting place. They have Baron Sharp as their director. I would really recommend you to check out the work they do there. You're also a professor of media innovation at the University of Adelaide. And of course, at the same time, you're the founder and CEO of Amplified Intelligence. We're going to hear much more about that in a bit. And as we've talked about, you're speaking, both in Australia and internationally many times a week. So I assume that a lot of people have seen you on stage at the Cannes Lion, maybe together with Peter Field, Orlando Wood, and a lot of great people there talking about attention and creativity and marketing effectiveness. And we are very pleased to have you with us today, Karen. We've been looking very much forward to it. The agenda for this crash course, we're going to talk about, why you need to adjust to get attention, why you need to adjust your digital campaigns and ads to get attention. Then I'm going to hand over the mic to you, Karen, and you're going to talk about some of the problems or challenges facing the marketing ecosystem today. We're going to talk about the upside from great creatives, how to get more attention, what to put in your campaigns in order to actually get more active attention from your audience. You brought us some use cases also about attention and attention measurement from your company. And in the end, we're going to have some questions. Just on the side here, a recent campaign we did together with Carlsberg and their advertising agency. So just to let you know a bit of what we're doing. But let's head into it. Why do you need to adjust for attention? Well, Karen, you've seen loads of those studies. You've done a lot of research yourself. This one is from, Danish and their attention economy study in Denmark. It says, half of us stop watching ads after, 1 second. And you also shown, that 85% of campaigns and ads, don't get the active attention that is actually needed to be remembered, and loads of study around the difficulties of actually getting attention, getting effect with your advertising. So that's why you kind of need to adjust a lot of things to get attention. Just a quick overview. On an ad level, you need to work hard actually to maximize the attention, the branding, the branded moments. You can get the engagement you can get within every single ad. At the same time, you need to adjust every ad in your campaign to fit the platform, the media, the channel, because all ads exist within the boundaries of each media and channel. And you're going to tell us much more about this as well, Karen. The third thing is that, of course, you need to adjust your campaigns to the context within their showing up and the funnel stage that they're a part of as well. You can just adjust a lot of things also at the funnel stage, the CTA, the creatives, the messaging. There are a lot of things you can do. And the fourth thing is that, of course, we know that all campaigns, all marketing campaigns exist within the boundaries of each company, the budget, the deadlines, the goals, the resources, and everything. So when talking about digital campaigns, this is all the things you need to adjust in order to get the effect that you hope for. The results, of course. So how does, a modern marketing setup, what does it look like, and what is our experience here? Well, most bigger companies, they have an advertising agency to create, the story, the overall concept, brand universes, TV commercials. We have some great advertising agencies in Denmark. I mean, just a couple of years ago, one of them was ranked #1 in the world, #1 creative agencies. They're really skilled at within creating creative campaigns, and they're doing really well there. In the other end, you have the media agencies. Also, we have some really skilled media agencies in Denmark. Very good at the strategy, the target groups, the media buying, etc. So what we do is that we kind of, squeeze in the middle at Adjust, and we take all the great stuff you get from the advertising agencies. Sometimes it's also, the pictures of the videos you have within your company, and we kind of adjust them. We transform them into digital ads for each channel in order to maximize the attention, maximize the creativity, and make it fit for each channel, each media. I'm going to show you a few examples of this as well. We do it very fast. We have motion graphic designers, digital designers, developers writing a lot of code in order to get those campaigns to work properly. Just one example here from Audi, just to show, how the same material is adjusted to all the different platforms, no matter where you need to show up, where you've done your media buying, where you spend your money in order to get attention and marketing effect here. So whatever channel, we transform it, your material to perform the best there. A brief example here on how it works. We've done it with Warner Brothers Discovery for one of their TV series called The Island. And you see they just send us their key assets, their videos. And again, we make the ads to get the most attention in all the channels. Here you see the digital out of home. You see high impact formats taking over almost the whole screen. The display ads, the SoMe ads, wherever you're going, we can use these. We can use animation, put in the video in different ways. We also, for this campaign, we use dynamic features. So when the premiere was on a Thursday, then when Thursday came, we can say, okay, watch this tonight. So you don't have to change your ads all the time, but kind of dynamically they update themselves. Of course, the same regards to all the SoMe, the social media that all the formats there, using the materials to create attention, to get engagement, to get people to watch your stuff, because that's what's important here. Just going to show you one last example here. We just did this recently. It's a Danish lottery. Lottery company. The advertising agency created a great, story here with people losing their coupons, and we transformed that into, an attention-grabbing ad here. And what you see on the mobile is actually an interactive ad that we made from the same. So when people are scrolling on their screens, the laundry machine is actually spinning around. So it's the user actually controlling the ad here, making it spin. And there's around 2,500 lines of code to create an ad like that. So it takes a bit of time, but the effect is really, really great. And we see people playing a lot with the ad, spending a lot of time, a lot of active attention on this campaign. So the effect is really, really good when we do that. And Karen, this is my last slide before handing over the microphone to you, because this is what it's all about, and why we invited you and why we're talking together today. Because all companies can spend a lot of money to get reach. They might be lucky that their ads are also viewable out there, but the big step on the staircase is to get actual attention, active attention. And as you've shown in all of your research, around 75% of the ads that company pay for, they don't deliver the value that they think they do. So it's a very steep step here. But once you climb that step to get the active attention, to get people to engage, interact with your ad, the chances increases that they will consider your brand at the category entry points, whenever they're in that purchase situation. And over time, you'll create the mental availability and the sales effect and all the things that we're chasing and hoping for when we do marketing. And it has been shown that it's both, the long and the short-term effect that is boosted when you get attention, when you focus on creativity, etc. So with that, Karen, I'm going to hand over the mic to you.
Great. Thank you. That was amazing.
Thank you. Just 1 second. I'll find it here. And we'll change.
Okay.
So
got it.
Take it away.
Yep. Thank you, Andreas, and thank you, Team Adjust. This is the first time I've presented in this country, so I'm pretty excited to be here. I'm sorry I can't speak the language. I should have done some homework on that. The team asked me to talk a little bit about marketing is broken and is attention the currency to save it. I think what I wanted to try and do today is talk through, I guess, 3 problems that attention metrics are aiming to solve. But I also want to talk a little bit about how the ecosystem is starting to land, because I think it's really important. So a lot of people do and are starting to understand, I guess, the problem with marketing measurement today. But it's also important to see what the course correct is. So I guess my goal for this presentation is to give you a set of learnings that you can take away to sort of understand not just what we're solving for, but the why. So what is the cause of inattention? What is the cause of the situation we're in now? What's the consequences to you as marketers? And of course, what's the course correct? So I'm going to start. This is a very negative statement. Trust me, it gets funner. But impression data fails advertisers. And, if anyone has seen me present before, you'll understand why I say this. And for anyone who knows my background, I used to, as an academic, I was, my PhD was audience measurement, but I did it a lot in the legacy media. So I was very aware of how measurement worked. And, there was a point in time where we used to measure humans, which is what I call outward. And we'd, albeit in a very sort of old-fashioned way, if you like, through census data or, through diaries or people meters. But we used to measure what humans and how humans interacted with different media types. And then there was a point in time when we sort of transitioned when, particularly socials, I guess, but all the other digital platforms started to become mass and scalable. And we stopped measuring humans and we started to measure what I call inward, so outward versus inward. And fair enough, because we need a scaled solution. So there was a point in time where we stopped measuring humans and we started to measure impression data, which is the assumption of how humans behave. And that kind of causes this. So I call this the Achilles heel of modern media measurement. And that being that it became the most important. So time of view became the most important critical variable of all time in the last sort of 15 years. But the reality is it fundamentally fails us. Now, most people kind of understand and are smart enough to understand that for every second of time, someone is not looking at the ad. But the reality is most people don't really understand 2 things. They don't understand the significance of the lack of attention in every second. But second to that, They don't tend to understand the flow-on effects of how this relationship works across different platforms and formats. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So time in view is the most important critical independent variable of modern measurement, but it fails us because about 1 in 3 chance each second someone's actually looking. And this happens because of this. So again, we all kind of understand that we don't sort of sit there in a concentrated way and watch an ad as it's kind of on the screen in any kind of, 30 seconds way. And what happens is we naturally get distracted from our friends, our family, a video, whatever's happening in the background. Sometimes we're dual screening or triple screening. So the reason why this relationship is happening where time in view isn't related to human attention is because we naturally get distracted and we're constantly switching, right, between looking at the ad, then not looking at the screen, then talking to our friend or looking at something else or looking back at the screen, reading the feed, then maybe scanning the ad. So we're constantly switching between active attention, which is looking at the ad directly, which Andreas mentioned, passive attention, which is looking at the screen or nearby to the screen, and non-attention, which is not having any sort of ability to notice the ad at all visually, possibly auditory, but not in a visual way. So the problem we face is that these attention gaps, if you like, are not accounted for by time in view. So if you think about time in view, it's a counter, literally, of time. And then if we're constantly switching, there are moments in time when we're not doing what it says we're doing, which is looking at an ad. So these attention gaps are not accounted for by modern measurement, and therein lies our problem. So this is why a lot of vendors and a lot of people call out viewability as the villain. And, I have to say, when I was first looking at this, I knew there was going to be a measurement crisis eventually because, 8-9 years ago, I started researching viewability and the gaps that it left. And, I called out viewability as well, sort of suggesting that it didn't do its job. It's a currency that doesn't do its job. However, I kind of pull it back a bit and I say, viewability is not the villain here. It was brought in at a time when the internet was very unregulated, when, as marketers or brands, you were paying for ads that were not even served. So to have any sort of standard around servability or distribution or, making sure that it lands on a page, I think is very valid. But what it has done over time is it actually inputs the problem it has is it inputs time in view. So the critical input variable for viewability is time in view. And, Andreas said it before, but the problem with that is that about 75% of MRC accredited or viewable ads actually get zero attention, zero. And that is that 1 in 3 relationship that we spoke to before. So again, it's not the concept of viewability that I challenge. It's the fact that it's picked the wrong measurement variable. Most people don't understand how significant the flow-on effects are for the fact that time in view doesn't do what it says. It's supposed to be the linchpin. In fact, measurement is supposed to be equal across units or equal across boundary conditions. But the flow-on effects, my personal passion is reach-based planning, and we're going to talk a little bit about that, but it goes much deeper than that. So any relationship, model, system, concept that you're using within your agencies or brands, and even publishers, relating to quality metrics using time in view as the linchpin will fail you. So, anything from share of voice, share of market planning to cost per completed anything, because completion rates are largely to do with time in view and not to do with, attention as such. Budgeting, econometric models, all sorts of things. So there's a really significant flow-on effect. So the second thing I want to talk to you about is this. So we talked about time in view not doing its job. That's one thing. Then there's this concept called attention decay, right? So it's not so much related to time in view, but it's about how we actually interact with platforms. Again, most of you know this and you're all smart, But people don't understand the significance of the variability across platforms and formats, and most people don't understand the significance to reach-based planning, for an example. And this in particular is literally why not all reach is equal. So this one thing I'm about to talk to you about is the core issue as to why not all reach is equal. So let's start here. Attention decay, as I said, is the concept of how quickly someone will literally avoid your ad. Now, there are two types of attention decay. Put a line in the sand. I'll explain in a minute that putting a line in the sand is a pretty simplistic way to explain it, but it just helps people understand if you think about it. So one is where you scroll heavily or at all. So it's scroll, it's skip, it's avoidance, it's, moving on from an ad, turning off in some cases, where what happens is you see that in the first second, because the ad is right in your space, someone will, and a large proportion of the reach that you've bought will actually be looking at that one moment in time, but they quickly scroll away because they know how to avoid. So if you think about a natural distribution of viewing, this is called fast decay, where there's a lot of people up front and then it fast decays off the cliff. And by the end of the ad, there's very few people actually looking at it. It's called fast decay.
Is this all sorts of ads that you've tested here, or what kind of ads are we looking at here?
It's largely digital, but I'm not here to call out different platforms and formats, but it's anything where you can naturally avoid watching it through the user experience of the platform. So it gives you an opportunity to skip it fast, or scroll fast, or side swipe fast, or, literally switch out. So anything in that kind of camp is generally a fast decay. Some of them, and we'll talk about this in a minute, but some of them, the decay curve is slightly less steep, but the concept is the reach that you buy, pretty much look at it in second one, or at least, because we calculate it, we actually collect the data down to 0.2 of a second. So in some cases, it might be the first half a second, and then it quickly scrolls away. Slow decay, on the other hand, is, people are still switching through this because this is an aggregated measure. So people are still switching, but what you see is that people at the beginning of the ad, the same amount of people are watching at the beginning of the ad as they are the end of the ad. So we call that slow decay. And you tend to find that's ads for the opposite of that, the ones you can't technically scroll away from or skip in any kind of sense. Now, the importance of this, I'll get to how that affects reach-based planning in a minute, but the importance of this also is about longer ads. So just for argument's sake, if you put a 10-second ad on a fast decay platform, you might get 5 seconds, just for argument's sake. If you put a 20-second ad on, you'll still get 5 seconds of attention. If you put a 30-second on, you'll still get 5 seconds of attention. So with that, by putting a longer ad on those types of formats, you have no way of getting additional attention, because the nature of the user experience teaches you to actually leave and be distracted and scroll away and I guess avoid, if you like, versus a slow decay platform. So if you go back to the same example, if you put 10-second ad length on a slow decay, you might get 5 seconds. If you put a 20-second on, you'll probably get 10 seconds. If you put a 30-second on, you'll probably get 15 seconds. And it's the nature of the viewing distribution that's doing that. So you can now all platforms are important, but you can kind of start to think about, if you understand all of that, in terms of how you plan for different types of objectives, whether it's brand building or whether it's refresh, you really can kind of understand that they are very different. Yet, both of those impressions are supposed to be considered equal, and they're not. So this is why not all reach is equal has an impact on everything that I've seen. So it has a massive, massive impact on reach-based planning. So you mentioned I worked for Aaron Bass, that's where I did my PhD, and you would have seen that I've probably had some public encounters, if you like, with Byron, where he kind of talks to reach-based planning still being very critical. And that is true, except the materials underneath are not stationary. Let me explain. So reach-based planning is based on this concept that for the entirety of the ad length, the 1 million people that you buy are watching for every second. Now, again, everyone knows that's not a reality, but bear with me, that is what reach-based planning. So if you buy 1 million impressions, you get 1 million impressions. If you buy it on platform A, platform B, platform C, theoretically, you get this 100% volume, if you like. But have a think about what it does when you have different viewing distributions, right? This is an example. But if you've got a fast decay distribution, when you actually do the math, the way that people are exiting, you literally have, in this situation, 20% of the reach that you paid for looking at any one time. So it's a vast difference from the 100% volume that you think you're getting. If you look at a slow decay example, in this case, it's 40% of the reach that you've bought is looking at the ad or has seen the ad for an extended amount of time. So think about what that does to the traditional reach metrics or traditional reach curves, and we'll show you that in a minute. Now, again, even if you can really understand that that makes sense, the problem we face is you can't just go, oh, that's okay, we'll just build an aggregated index and adjust for that. The problem we face is that every device, format, platform, ad length, and to some degree demographic, but less so the demographic, it's more about the user experience with the platform itself, has a different shape, right? So the fast decay can be faster or slightly less fast than the fastest, if that makes sense. And so when you think about what that does to volume, this is literally why not all reach is equal, because you can have a fast decay on a feed platform and a fast decay on, a stories platform, for example, yet the distribution is different of viewing. And again, yet you're paying for the same kind of impressions numbers, but your volume is very different. So let's look at it in this example. So reach curves are a quite traditional measure of reach, budget, and expected kind of where you get to diminishing returns, right? So it's based on this relationship, though, that 100% of the seconds that you're investing, 100% of the reach is there against the budget and against how many people you want to reach. But that doesn't work when you have a volume issue. So if you don't do anything else today, think about reach from a three-dimensional perspective. In the old days in legacy media and for the term of history when, it was about human engagement, you really only needed budget and reach to be able to understand what a reach curve looks like. But if you think about it from a volume play, you need to actually downweight a traditional reach curve to account for this volume issue. And what you can see is that the lower the volume, the more inaccurate your reach curve is. So let's kind of take a step back. If you think about if you're spending $10 million and your competitor is spending $10 million and you're buying, I don't know, let's call it a 10 million impressions and your competitor is buying 10 million impressions, but where you buy those impressions is in a very different distribution. Theoretically, you might get less eyeballs, quite considerably so, than your competitor. You're spending the same money and you're buying the same amount of impressions. So have a think about what that does to share of voice, share of market. So if anyone understands that relationship, I actually presented this last year at Cannes with Peter Field, and we followed it up this year with Orlando Wood and Rob Britton. But basically that relationship is if you spend more money, you will get more market share. Now, there are elasticities around that and rules, but the relationship is broken. So we presented this last year, and Rob Peter Field came in and said it kind of accounts that when the relationship started to decline, strangely enough, is at the same point when impression data become the linchpin. So really interesting. Now, this is fixable, but again, often if there are any creatives in the room, people sort of underestimate this as a consequence. It also impacts the number of people seeing your branded moment. Now, that is pretty obvious. But again, I don't know that a lot of people really understand the significance of that. So most marketers and creatives won't want to put their branded moment right at the front because there is a natural objection to that, thinking that's offensive. The truth is that won't change anything. But most people, even if you put your branded moment at second 2, 3, 4, 5, what we can see from all the data that we've collected is that a large proportion of the reach volume has actually kind of skipped out by that point. So, you know, the moments of your brand being noticed are very, very limited. So we did this piece of work and we keep seeing the same results. And this is a really important point for us as a business. So the business that I have built is based on the fact, on the basis of generalizability. So we repeat, test, repeat, this sort of stuff. So when I present work to you, it's not a once-off. We see the same numbers, the same consistency, the same rules across all different conditions. But this piece of work was basically a starting point for us to go, you know, if we kind of threw out the net and tried to understand how many branded moments were seen on the open web, for example, which has a fairly fast decay, about 80% of the branded moments were seen by less than 20% of the volume. So if you think about that, particularly if you're a smaller brand or a challenger brand, that makes it really difficult for your ad to cause the link, to pull a link between, I guess, the ad and what you are, who you are as a brand, for example. So it's quite easy for you to be misattributed to the larger competitor, and we'll talk about that in a minute. So with less reach and fewer brand exposures, anyone understands law of double jeopardy. The reality is you won't be thought of at the purchase occasion, your competitor will. And we see this in the data all the time. So when we do mental availability tracking against attention platforms, and even we do sort of brand choice, you know, sort of spontaneous brand choice off of low and high and medium attention platforms, we know that a lot of misattribution happens when, surprise, surprise, the brand is not seen. So as we are in a creative forum here, I thought it'd be important to sort of add some things around the importance of distinctive assets. Now, this is obviously Professor Jenny Romaniuk's work, and we see this really apparent in the work that we do. So in an age when attention is exceptionally fleeting, distinctive assets become even more valuable. So any big brands in the room, don't rest on the fact that you've built them over 50 years and people will understand and be able to see them. What I am seeing a lot, and bearing in mind, we've done collections across 18 countries, so it's not small, 100,000, more than 100,000 panelists. What we're seeing is that a lot of the big brands are taking chances with some of the scrollable sort of digital media and not exposing their tried and tested distinctive assets to not offend youth, but also put it at the end. And the reality is a lot of those massive brands are being misattributed to other competitors in the competitor set. That's really, really important. I've been asked before, you know, what are some of really good examples where distinctive assets are used in low attention formats? And I think some of them, a couple of them are Australian brands, so probably are unaware. But what I think is really interesting is when an ad style is distinctively you. And in Australia, I'm thinking, well, you'd know Red Bull, that's a global brand. But so when the ad itself is quite distinctive, even in a fleeting half a second, someone will be able to recognize what that brand is for. So, and auditory assets are really valuable as well, because even in the passive attention moments, if your jingle is playing, it's likely that they're able to recognize that. So again, don't underestimate the value of distinctive assets. The problem you have is you've got to drive the memory cues towards that. So it's pretty hard to do on really short form platforms. The other thing I wanted to show you, and again, this is not at all something you wouldn't already know, but don't underestimate the value of the branded moment and what it does to an outcome. Again, no surprises. So we collect data on a sub-second level, and we also have contextual AI, which allows us to understand the branded moment within that period. And what we can see is when active eyes are on that particular moment, the likelihood of someone choosing is significant. There is a causal impact. Again, probably doesn't make any surprises to you, but even well-branded copy, bearing in mind we switch constantly, even this is a good example, less than half of the branded moments were seen actively. So this is not an example of any one platform at any time. It was this particular campaign. But it just goes to show that branded moments are super, super valuable, and they have the biggest, that they're the most contributor to an actual outcome, which makes me say this is why attention can't be predicted by outcomes very easily, because a good piece of creative will have a different outcome to a bad piece of creative in terms of branded moments. And similarly, the other thing I'll tell you is big brands and small brands do behave differently. So big brands will actually get per attention second less uplift because they're already big, whereas small brands gain more outcomes from the same attention seconds. So again, that's why you can't use outcomes to predict attention, but you can use attention to predict outcomes. And Andrea said this one, so I got in trouble a couple of years ago for this one, but it's become a bit of a viral slide. So when a lot of switching happens, it's hard for brands to get noticed because most of the time people are switching out, to his point, underneath what we call the attention memory threshold. Again, it's a line in the sand. Now, there are nuances around that, I understand. So if you're a big brand, this changes. But overall, we see that mental availability or brand, not recall, I don't believe in recall, but brand memory cues are moved or they decline beyond the 2.5 second mark. So that's kind of a good rule of thumb for how long an ad needs to be on for it to have some sort of significant effect to memory cues, not to refreshment, but certainly to memory structures. Now, this is super, super important. So creative and media have to work together. So I'm media background, but I also understand the value of creative and the synergistic effect that it has in the context of media placement. Now, I don't know, Nielsen, if you're in the room, so thank you for putting this piece of research out in 2017, but it is actually quite misleading. So they kind of came to the party at this point and started to talk about the importance of creative to outcomes. Now, while I don't disagree with that, what it does not, and it went to market as they were preparing a creative product, it's sort of talking about that creative is more valuable than media. I could not disagree more. Interestingly enough, there's a caveat in the method that talks about only consumers exposed to the ad can be influenced. That sort of says to me, actually, the media is important. Now, why I talk about this is because it starts this whole chicken and egg debate, I call it. And I've published a paper on this if you want to have a look. But it basically, which comes first, you know, the media or the creative. Now, let me show you something. None of the work that's done in a lot of these formats control for attention decay, nor do they control for holding creative constant in real time, real formats, real feeds, real reels. As you know, I'm ex-academic, so when I first left the university and started to build the technology to start to intercept cameras to understand how humans interact with different formats, we built this thing called, we call it insertion code. And basically what it allows us to do is it allows us to go into your Facebook feed, remove an ad that you were supposed to see and replace it with a Pepsi ad, for example. But I can also do that for another panelist in their TikTok feed and replace a Pepsi ad, etc. So all of the studies that we did in the first 4 years, we had the ability, and we constantly switched this on, where all of the ads that were seen across the different media platforms, formats and devices were constant, so that I could understand the influence of media versus creative. Now, the next slide I'm going to show you is what I call the most boring slide I have, but it's one of the most important ones. So this slide, I've got to put my glasses on because I can't see that far. This slide this is real data, and I see this over and over and over. You could ask me to collect in another 10 countries and I'm still going to see the same pattern. So this is platform A to platform D. I'm not going to call out which ones they are, but these are real formats. Brand A to brand M are real brands. What you can see in platform A is that brand A has 7 seconds that it achieved. The same creative achieved 5.5 in platform B, 3.3 in platform C, 2.9 in platform D. If you jump down to platform H, for example, brand H, for example, 5.9, 4.3, 2.7, 2.5. Brand L, 4.6, 4.3, 2.1, 2.4. You can see that there's a natural decay across all those different platforms in the same direction. So if you eyeball the column, platform A roughly gets around an average of about 6. Platform B gets an average of around 5-ish, maybe 4 and a late 4s. Platform C around 3, platform D around 2. You can see what I'm saying. So let's step back. If creative was the dominant force and it did drive attention, not necessarily outcomes, because we are talking about attention here, what you would see is that 7 seconds would be the brand A would get 7 seconds on platform A, platform B, platform C, platform D. So the amount of attention gained would be the same across all different platforms, and you don't. And that's because media placement dominates creative. Let me explain why. And it's 100% to do with the user experience. So the user experience, again, is defining how much attention you can earn, and then your creative fits within that. This is what we call attention elasticity. So we know that, no matter what you do, because I get asked, because it's funny, because I get told all the time, yeah, but we'll just build a better ad. Because if we build a better ad, that's okay, we'll buck the trend. But it doesn't work that way, again, because of the user experience. I often like to use cinema as, let's just call it a best case, and a very, very messy general web platform as the worst case. If you think about cinema, let me explain. The definition of attention, regardless of how you collect attention, we'll talk about that in a minute, the definition of attention has been around for years, 50 plus years. And that is that you stop what you're doing, you push out distractions, and you're trying to learn something, whether you're looking or whether you're hearing, but you're trying to concentrate your awareness towards one thing, right? So if you think about cinema in that same way, essentially you're locked in, it's dark, you're not allowed to use your phone because you get in trouble. You're not supposed to talk to your friend because you're going to get in trouble. And all distractions are removed. Take it back to, you've got multiple screens in front of you. You've got 3,000 ads flying at you. You've got kids, you've got a cat, you've got, the TV on in the background. That's, high distraction. So the format itself within that device is what and you're allowed to skip and you can switch out, is what defines this. So this, we know, each platform and format has a range of attention that is afforded to you, and your creative fits within that. And we see that over and over. So this one often gets a little bit of stress with it. I'm going to add device to the top, but essentially there's this hierarchy. So we see the device plays the biggest role, platform, format, in order, context in relation to relevancy, demographics play a role, and creative last. Now, bearing in mind, I'm talking about how it impacts the amount of attention you achieve, not the outcome, because the creative piece, particularly branded moments and things like that, has the largest role to play with outcomes. So bear that in mind. So studies like these are different to what I talk about because they haven't controlled, I guess, they focus on the outcomes, one thing, but they haven't also controlled to isolate the impact of both attention generating And on media versus creative, they haven't controlled for those two different influences. So I have a joke with myself, and I call it the egg wins. So if chicken or the egg wins. Now, what can we do? So this season in Cannes, I actually presented this recently. So poor Orlando Wood, I feel for him because he's a creative genius, and he really believes in the power of creative. And it's true. He should, because, broad being creative is very spectacular, and, on the right stage, it can do a beautiful job. So what we wanted to look at is what causes. So if anyone's seen a box and whisker plot, you'll know that the top end, very little data. So that's the range that you can achieve, but the bulk of data sort of sits in the middle. But the top end is about as far as you can go on platform A, for example. So we wanted to know what's the difference between the mean and the above, or put it a different way, what makes creative stronger or weaker. So to Andreas's point, it is a sizable difference between, oh my God, I can't see, between brand M and brand A in terms of the difference in the attention seconds. So that's not to sneeze at. So we have to understand the nuance that sits underneath that. Now, for what some of you might not know is I actually wrote a book 10 years ago around emotions and content diffusion. So I've had a very long history in understanding how emotions, and in the case of the book, it was on this theory around viral diffusion, so viral distributions, and sort of have a long history of understanding how emotions in content and impressions that you buy play a role, and what the math looks like. So I've got the slide first. I'll get back to this in a minute. But I was very encouraged because Orlando sort of came to me, and we partnered with Effie's, and we actually had a look at, emotions in the context of if that could actually sort of push the amount of attention up. And as I said, it sits within the boundary, but it certainly can. So I'll get to that. But I've thrown this one in there for tonight specifically because the other thing I want to explain is there's two types of triggers for attention. One is called top down. So that's why I said relevancy plays a role. So if it's propinquity and relevancy, so if you're in the market to buy and you're close to purchase occasion, you're more likely to, and that particular brand falls within the category of choice, you're more likely to look top down. That's hard to achieve because everyone knows, and obviously with cookies going away, how hard it is to target people with goal-orientated personal relevance. And then the other ones are what I call unexpected stimuli, or unexpectedness, so unintended and automatic attention. So this is where emotions fits in, because you weren't expecting to laugh out loud, but you did. You weren't expecting it to be super, super loud, and it is. You weren't expecting it to be super bright, and it was. Or the opposite, you weren't expecting it to have no sound at all, and so you look. So bottom-up triggers are largely what most advertisers build their content to. So going back to this study, we took many dozens of ads, and we looked at, so System 1 did their emotions coding, and then they sent me the data, and we actually passed it through our attention data to the same ads, because we tested them in real time across multiple different platforms to understand how emotion plays a role. Now, as I would have expected, given my history, because positive, high intensity, I call it high arousal, positive emotions do actually play a role. And I saw that more than 10 years ago. So in the context of viral, it helps the tail of on sharing just slightly more. So positive emotions do make a difference to the tune, in this study, to the tune of about 12%. I'm not going to generalize that because we've only done this a couple of times. But what I will say is really important is the upside of these positive emotions is highly dependent on the platform in which the ad plays, which is what we've been talking about all along. So check out this slide. What this shows you is there's actually, a bigger uplift. So this shows that high emotion gets you more attention to the tune of 3% on low attention media. But to the tune of 18% on high attention media. So if you think about what that means is high emotion matters, but it is, again, tempered. Its uplift is tempered within the performance of the platform as a whole. So again, if you think about it from the attention elasticity piece, you can't go any higher when you've got a tiny little range of attention. So that's what we're seeing in this data. So this slide sort of says, you know, the perfect nirvana people is high emotion, high attention. You do both. But what I can see here, and what I've proven before, is that, you know, in this case, low emotion still does better on high attention platforms than high emotion does on low attention platforms. So what that sort of says to me is that any creative, high or low emotion, still does better on higher attention platforms than even high emotion on low attention. So that's really interesting. Now, remember, this is not about the fact that emotions doesn't work. So I've consoled Orlando on that one and he gets it. It's purely because people are not watching and scrolling away. And it's, again, the user experience of the platform is what is defining how much attention you can gain. So we kind of agreed to sort of say, you know, emotional creative simply needs a better stage to be the star. And I think that's a really great way to say, I'm still calling it the egg wins, but the chicken helps you bring home a few more attention seconds when it can. And this is an example that Andreas and I wanted to show you of a really great, you know, win-win-win. So well-branded, high emotive, adjusted to the platform. So it's the perfect combination. Did you want to play the video?
Yeah, well.
Cheetos has popcorn now?
Hey, I'm going to need you to... Never mind.
You can't touch this.
Help!
You can't touch this. You can't touch this. You can't touch this.
Get it off.
Nope.
I trust you.
Why? Hammer time. I touched it. New Cheetos popcorn. It's a Cheetos thing.
So that's an excellent example of a funny ad, surprising, interesting, well-branded, early branded, right? So they kind of use the brand as, you know, and weren't sort of scared to kind of push it to the back end, which is what a lot of creative tend to do.
Yeah, and great humor as well. So
very funny, very funny. So I often talk about this concept of satisficing. So in a I guess world where we are constantly distracted, what we actually tend to do as humans, not just for ads obviously, but for life in general, you'll often have so many things going around. You'll hear, let's call it the husband speaking to you, but you'll only hear every third word because you're actually listening to something over here. And what happens is you fill in the gaps. It's called satisficing. So if you think about how ads work, even with attention, if the brand is missing, you know, you're not learning about what that ad is for, and we fill in the gaps. And I see that all the time in misattribution. Okay, last little section. So I think, you know, I think people are getting used to now what we're trying to solve for and the significance of the problem. And I mean, you know, this whole industry is changing a category, really. I mean, we're seeing, you know, attention data being integrated into some of the biggest agency holding codes, and you know, publishers and brands. And it is definitely changed. I will say one thing on record. I don't believe, and I think most people are on board with this now. So this is not a currency as such. So reach is the currency. But where I see this data working is a set of signals to equalize the error that sits behind time in view. So just a word of warning, any metrics that use time in view as the linchpin of its algorithm, you just need to be a bit careful. So I thought I would kind of talk to how this ecosystem is landing, because it's easier to sort of understand attention data this way. Again, I'm very much about a line in the sand to make life easier. And attention data falls broadly into two buckets, which is human and non-human, pretty simple. So human attention data is person level data where you're literally connected, and we're doing biometrics, so we'll talk about that in a minute. But human is the obvious. It's you're testing how humans are interacting with formats, whereas synthetic data, impression level data is what we've already speak about. So human and non-human. Now, synthetic tags, and you'll see some of the big organizations starting to work with these. We collect, we have a vast tag ourselves, but I'll get to the situation in a minute. But a lot of the bigger organizations are kind of using these advanced viewability factors to call out attention data. And that's one sort of attention data that's out there. So they use height. So this is the problem. Time in view is still the major optimized variable. But then they use these engagement factors like scroll speed and, volume. We even have phone orientation and whether you've got earpods in and things like that. So we collect up to about 100 factors. But the problem we have is that this is still implied behavior. So what I'm trying to tell you is that scroll speed can be both a distractor. You can be paying attention because you're not scrolling, but you could also be trying to hold the phone and talking to someone so the phone doesn't go dark. So most of these factors can be both, attention and non-attention, and that's problematic, and that's why there's errors in these types of tags. Human attention is the literal observation of humans through cameras. So we collect through PC, mobile, we've done tablet, we've now done cinema, we do TV, CTV, we've actually done outdoor. So we literally collecting footage of humans through triple opt-in means. So it's privacy safe, but we're basically filming them. And then that data is passed through machine learning models, and there's 3 different models. One is via gaze, which is the one that you've probably heard about the most, which is, because we're close to the PC or close to the mobile, I can see where you're looking. The second piece is facial detection or facial recognition. We use facial detection because we don't want to recognize who you are as a human. We just want to understand the landmarks on your face. So we then can mathematically calculate, the reality of if your nose is in that direction, what happened? Are you likely to be able to see? And similarly with pose estimation in long form, like outdoor, if something's walking towards an outdoor installation, is it a dog or is it a human? So we use pose estimation to that effect. This is observed behavior. Now, what I'm going to say is there are pluses and minuses for both. So each data has its own sets of limitations. So footage of humans in real time, in real formats, in their own feeds, in their homes, in their buses, whatever, is the ultimate accuracy. So when you're filming people doing what they do naturally, not in a lab, not with goggles, just literally through a camera, it's the most accurate you can get because it is just literally a human. But it has a massive scale issue. So even when we talk about, we've done over 100,000 panelists, it's a big world, and it's also a privacy issue, and it's exceptionally expensive. But humans are very complex, so we need this kind of data as a baseline, and we'll talk about that in a minute. Impression data is exceptionally scalable. So we have a vast tag, so I could deliver you, hundreds of millions, if you like, impressions in a very short amount of time. And people might even talk to billions and billions of data points really, really easily. But the reality is it has an exceptional accuracy issue. So if you, again, base your tag off the back of time in view as the primary and don't understand the format or the platform and how its nuances are with a human, they become their accuracy is exceptionally limited. So this is where a lot of the market is going. And in some cases, some of the big measurement publishers are big measurement businesses. So this is ground truthing. So anyone in a machine learning sense in the audience will understand this. So the more complex the behavior, the more you need solid ground truth data to essentially tell the story. If you think about ChatGPT, even to this day, they still collect your response to the answers to continuously improve their models as they go. And that's what true machine learning is. You continuously collect human data and it pushes out algorithms to improve. You continuously collect human data and the algorithms improve. And that's what's happening. So human data informs the impression tags. The impression tags then are constantly updated with continuous data. So I'm about to write my second book called The Attention Economy 2, and I talk to this a lot. This is what I call the reinvention of invention. So viewability came at a time when we needed it, but we're in a place now where advanced viewability has moved on. Now we're starting to talk about attention, but there's a lot of proxies out there. The future is human-informed attention, but in a scaled way. So it's the combination of both. So just quickly, I call them the Fab Four, the 4 use cases that you'll start to see in the industry, not just us. Measurement and benchmarking, where people will want to know how their ads perform in Facebook feed versus YouTube pre-roll versus, Snapchat AR, for example. And there are, including us, we're able to do that for brands, and it's really interesting for them to understand how different brands perform. It's not meant to be pre-testing, but it gives you some understanding of how your campaigns will perform in the real time. We actually have some new AI being dropped in the next 2 months, actually, which I will put in a press release for you, which will augment this in a significant way, particularly around context. But then what happens is we use this individual data to inform our products. So we don't believe in aggregation, even though I talk to seconds of time. It's the easiest way that people can get their head around what is attention, but we actually don't even use seconds as in any of our models or in any of our products. So we use it very much at the individual person level data, and it goes into planning, and optimization. So we actually have an agency grade optimizer that we build these reach curves and all of this data into across, I think it's about 12 countries. And then the other use case is the one that you've probably heard of, which is sort of in-flight media verification with vast tags. So we do that as well, but it always rings back to the human data point to make sure that the accuracy between the tag and the human is high, as is 0.98. Look, so that's all I wanted to talk about. This is not a sales pitch, but if you want to have a play with reach curves, they're super fun to play with. And I can send this, Andreas, the team there can have this if they want the presentation, because it's really fun to sort of play around with data and sort of understand, what your media plan might look like within this context. Just to finish up, where do I start? I have to put my glasses on, sorry, getting old. I think the first piece is just understand what we're talking about here and understand how inequitable impressions might actually impact your business. It's a really important baseline to start with. Start to think about how your creatives might perform within these elastic ranges. Talk to your creative team. So media and creative should work together because you can only do so much with the time that you have. The easiest place to start are test and learns from strategy management and planning. They're the easiest things and make a massive difference to things like, cost of goods sold and profitability and all sorts of real meaty kind of business metrics. And I will say the last thing I'll say, oh, look, all my ones went to ones. It's supposed to be 1, 2, 3, and 4. But the last thing I'll say is keep procurement in the loop, because the single thing that procurement are supposed to do is keep costs down. They've got one job to do. And when you start kind of going in there and saying, actually, we want to buy different impressions, they might have a slightly higher CPM, but we'll buy fewer of them. They struggle with that. So your job is to bring procurement along for the journey and help them understand all of this information so that when you do go and say, yep, this year we're going to buy this inventory and it's higher in its CPM, but we're going to buy fewer of them, they'll understand. So thank you so much. I'm really grateful for your time.
Thank you so much, Karen. Very, very interesting to see. Just to finish off, we've got a few questions from the audience. Some have sent me on beforehand, and some have used the chat here. So one of the question is, what do you think of attention prediction models? The algorithms here, and what metrics would be the most correct in order to measure attention?
Yeah, I mean, I think I sort of said I believe that we need scaled measurement, but as I said, we're not predicting anything basic here. We're predicting human behavior. So there's a land grab for vast tag type attention metrics, and they fail to talk to the human behavior, and they fail to sort of accurately define how humans are interacting with platforms. So I believe in them, but I believe in the human first approach, which there are a few vendors that are doing that.
Yeah, great. I was of course happy also to see, you're saying about, the creative has to fit the platform, because that's all we focus on here as well, in order to get as much attention as possible. So I think a lot of people, and that's one of the questions, are thinking, do you all the time see the relationship between, the attention metrics and the real world effect, the outcomes of marketing?
Oh, absolutely. Look, this is a really great question, because, anything new needs to be validated with outcomes, right? I totally understand that. But what I don't actually believe in is spurious outcomes. So what I mean by that is we've moved on from some brand metrics. We use mental availability and proper discrete choice modeling, to be quite frank. So it's quite robust in the way that we measure outcomes. But, recall is a very spurious measure. Intent, sometimes, even if you intend to do something, often you don't. And sometimes there's bias around these brand metrics that people are using to prove outcomes. So what I would ask of the audience is that you start to think about, rather than metrics that, are brand related, think about how they are business related. So I've written a paper recently called Media Proof, which talks to, over time we've seen that the impact of changing the way that you buy in strategy, for example, so even a strategic decision to do shorter ads, less static or more static, whatever it might be, can make a vast difference on things like profit, cost of goods sold, resources required, things like that. So look, there's plenty of evidence around. In fact, I've just done a call on LinkedIn for anyone that's had experience in that, for us to publish some of those. So there's plenty of evidence. We just need to make sure that the evidence is robust.
Great. I had a question on beforehand asking, there are already, 5, 6, 7 different companies or vendors, offering to measure attention and effect on your campaigns, maybe the brand funnel. Do we need some kind of standard, some kind of European standard, or more broad?
Well, it's interesting. Yeah, look, to be quite honest, there are some industry bodies that are doing a good job. I mean, ARF are doing a wonderful job to kind of, I guess, draw attention, excuse the pun, to the metrics and the requirements, because they're obviously connected to MRC and things like that. I think it's an interesting one, because I often talk about, do we need the same standard? Look, I think that's difficult. I don't think that's going to be easy to do. And some measures are better. Like, so for example, I talked about biometrics in terms of visual and facial recognition. But the reality is there's also neuro, right? It just has a different use case. So neuro is small sample, and you can't buy against number of heartbeats per second. It just doesn't translate in the media space. So from a creative diagnostic space, great. So I think it really depends on the use case. If anyone wants to know, I actually have built out a matrix of different use cases and how how different metrics give you different pieces of information. So I think the answer to that is, I'm not sure you can. I think you should ask your vendor some really difficult questions. I think transparency and accuracy you should ask for every single time. So what is their method? Show us underneath the hood. Where is the accuracy? How do you define accuracy? And often I define accuracy by repeatable results. So, I mean, we can allow anyone under the hood anyway. You can see our models, but if you get repeated, consistent results across boundary conditions, you are starting to see something that works. But when you get metrics or units or scores that it depends, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, then that's not good. So you just need to, in your RFIs, ask your vendors about accuracy and transparency.
Great, thanks. Some people here in the chat asking, how can you maybe as a planner compare, sites with low or high attention, or the fast and slow decade platforms? I think for most people it's obvious that TikTok and probably social media is fast decay, but how do you distinguish?
Yeah, so if they're asking me, am I going to call out which platforms are in which end, I don't do that, because each platform plays a role. And I've been in trouble for that before, because, look, the reality is there is data available for that, and you can get benchmarks from different vendors. But I would prefer not to sort of, I've given, if you think about what line in the sand that I've just given you, I've given you enough understanding that you can do the math in your own head. But yeah, I don't want to say what's best, worst, which way.
No. A question, how do you measure mental availability?
That's a good question, left of field. So, obviously I did 10 years at Aaron Big Bass, so I've read and worked with the amazing Professor Jani Ramoniak many years. So we use it because mental availability is essentially, let's forget the viewing experience, but the concept of mental availability is how many people assign your brand to how many category entry points. So let's take, for example, what brand do you think of when you're going to propose to a woman? So that's a category entry point, a proposal. And you typically think of, it's silly, or let's go a different way. What brand do you think of beer when you want to go to the footy with your mates? That's a category entry point. So the call out with mental availability is the more people that think of more category entry points, you'll have a greater share of mental availability, or greater share of mind, if you like. And you measure that alongside your competitor set. So you come out with, we get 30% against our competitor, and our better competitor gets 40% of mental market share. So that's essentially how you measure it. And what we do is we assign that to viewing and non-viewing and how much attention is given. That's how I can do all of those, how many seconds works, because we can see decline or movement, even small movement in mental availability, because we have massive samples, and how many category entry points are thought of against viewing and non-viewing. So it's quite robust. It's not an easy, simple, dot point survey after review that we ask. It's quite complicated.
Yeah, and it's quite interesting as well. So we always see kind of the relationship between creative and fitting it all for the platform. We can see that also in the engagement data that we have, and when we work with other companies to actually measure that. So
I've seen that before. In fairness, I put that on record. I've seen that before. So fit for purpose is a thing, and it makes quite a massive difference to, it still fits within the boundaries, which we've spoken about 100 times, but it actually, so that's kind of this contextual relevance piece. It's not just about relevance to the human in terms of am I in the category, but it's also relevance to the platform and the content, if you like.
Yeah, it's great to hear, because again, that's what we work for every day, to get the brand out, to get the attention from the very first second here. Karen, I think that was about it. I'm just gonna share my screen again here just to wrap it all off here. to say now we've had a very interesting session today. And again, thank you so much for participating. And to all of you out there, the next crash course we're going to hold is a whole different topic about ad fraud. We have the independent ad fraud expert, Dr. Augustin Foe, with us all the way from New York in October. He's been looking into this, and there's too much fraud going on, but he also has, a very interesting presentation, and it's going to show you how is ad fraud taking place, what kind of sites. Maybe some of you heard about the YouTube scandal lately. So there's a lot going on, but there's also something we can do to avoid it as advertisers. So you can join us there. We're also planning for a session on what we call the 1 second rule in order to, get your brand and your messaging out fast. Also on the Fast Decay media, as Karen told you about. So follow us on LinkedIn. We also have on our website, on-demand crash courses. You can see how we use interactive ads and campaigns. We build in some things that people can play with and interact with within the ads, how to convert your videos to more eye-catching digital ads, how to use the high-impact ads, etc. We have a lot of things there that you can sign up for, and you can have a short crash course on how to get more effect of your branding and your digital campaigns and your budgets and all the material you've invested in from the great advertising agencies, and giving it to your media agencies in order to get more effect from all your effort. So dive into that as much as you want, and we hope to see you again for one of our next crash courses. Karen, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.
Have a lovely
Bye,
afternoon
everyone.
in Australia.
Thank you.
Bye.